My name is Alara June Whitfield, and I moved home for 2 months. If you're looking for my age in the original story, you won't find it. What mattered then wasn't the number, it was the math. The day I carried 2 suitcases into my parents' Connecticut house, I felt like someone stepping into a recovery room. Calm voice, shallow breath, pretending embarrassment looked like composure. I had just shuttered a small business I'd poured 3 years into. 2 weeks after the final sale, my boyfriend of 5 years packed his half of the drawers and left a note that said we wanted different futures. I took the note, folded it into a square, and used it as a coaster until the ink ran. Back in the house I hadn't called home since 19, I offered myself up as quiet labor. I bought groceries, patched drywall, recaulked a bathroom, kept to the edges. At dinner, I answered when spoken to. I made a point not to look like a guest or a ghost. My contingency plan lived in the closet, $18,000 in cash inside a small safe hidden behind shoeboxes. 10 years of odd jobs and side gigs and I'll skip dinner out decisions. Not a fortune, just the promise that if I fell, I'd never hit concrete. 6 weeks in, the family reunion detonated across the lawn the way reunions do. Folding tables, wasp-guarded soda, a grill smoking like a faulty engine. Uncles with stories, aunts with opinions. My mother made too much food because abundance is her favorite argument. My father manned the barbecue with the confidence of a man who believes smoke is a love language. Tyler, my younger brother, made his entrance like a headline, accepted into a very expensive, vaguely impressive liberal arts program in Massachusetts. Business program, he said, in the tone people use when they don't want to answer questions. He hugged me too long, too close, like an apology admitting itself in public, then pretending it didn't. By sunset, the yard fell quiet. Cars pulled away. Somebody forgot a half-eaten cob of corn on a paper plate. I climbed the stairs to my room on legs that didn't belong to me and stood in the doorway, listening to a house I knew by heart try to act like nothing had happened. I don't know why I went straight to the closet. Maybe I wanted proof that at least one thing was still exactly where I left it. I moved the shoe boxes. The safe looked the same, locked, unremarkable, patient. I typed the code by muscle memory. The beep was faithful. I turned the handle. Empty. No envelopes. No folded bills bound with rubber bands. No spare documents. A silence so total the air felt padded. I closed it, opened it, as if money learned to play hide and seek. Rifled drawers, checked luggage, lifted the mattress like the answer might be underneath breathing. But I knew. 11 months ago, when I bought the safe, Dad had called it paranoid. Put money in a bank, he'd said, like humor could be interest-bearing. Footsteps. My father appeared in the doorway holding a coffee cup the way men hold small proof of normalcy. He didn't look surprised to see the safe. He didn't look surprised to see it open. We took a family vote, he said, smiling like he was about to read the weather and it would be sunny. You can't live here for free. We invested that money in your brother's college. Everyone agreed it was the right thing. Everyone? I asked. Your mother, your aunts, Tyler, me. He gestured toward the hall, toward the house, like the walls had raised their hands too. You're not contributing, and he has a future. We made a decision. My laugh sounded like a cough. You broke into my safe. We opened a conversation, he corrected, and paid the first tuition. You should be proud. Family steps up. Pride. The word came through me like a dull blade. What you did is illegal, I said, and you better pray I don't go any further. He took a slow sip like he had all the time in the world. Then you won't mind what happens next, I added, and watched his smile sharpen. He laughed. There are laughs that admit delight and laughs that dare you. This was the latter. He walked away feeling taller. I stood there with a safe full of air and realized I had spent a lifetime making myself smaller so other people could feel just right. I didn't pack that night. I loaded. By dawn, the house was still half asleep when I set the suitcases by the door. I took my laptop, a file folder from the back of a desk drawer, Grandpa's trust papers, and the kind of anger that knows where it's going. I left my key on the console and the note under it unread. I drove north. Asphalt unspooled. My phone shook itself to pieces. 37 missed calls by mid-morning, messages layered, the crescendo of a chorus that had never learned harmony. Tyler, what did you do? Mom, call me, please. You're overreacting. Dad, Answer the phone. Unknown numbers. Blocked. Voicemails. Ignored. By noon, I was deep in Vermont, gravel popping under my tires, pine and smoke braided into the air. Uncle Rick's cabin didn't look like a retreat so much as a decision. A 2-story wooden refusal, generator humming, a porch that stares down the road like it knows what's coming. He was waiting in a cut-sleeve sweatshirt, sipping coffee from a chipped cup. Rick quit finance a decade ago with a single sentence, "The modern world can go to hell," and built a life that meant it. He opened the screen door with a nod. Rooms upstairs. We ate eggs and sausage off tin plates on the back porch the next morning. He lit a cigarette he had claimed to have quit and listened in the old way. No interruptions, no shoulder squeezes, just a tension so steady it made me want to tell the truth straighter than usual. I told him about the safe, about Dad's smile, about the vote, about the way the word invested tasted when it's chewed with your savings. I told him how Mom dresses theft and altruism, how everyone agreed is the family's favorite spell. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. He went inside, came back with a dusty folder, and set it between us, as if we were dealing cards. In it were letters and copies, dates and signatures, a paper hallway through the last 15 years. In the middle, a slip, a signed IOU from my father to Uncle Rick, dated 2015, for $18,000. He borrowed my money, Rick said, voice flat. Kept promising, next month, next quarter, next bonus. He never paid it back. I'm tired of waiting. I put my hand on the folder. It felt heavier than paper. I have Grandpa's trust, I said. There's a clause. Rick's eyes sharpened. The protection clause? I nodded. The trust wasn't huge, about $40,000 total, but the clause was a sealed door in a house full of thieves. Explicit protection against intra-family financial abuse. I had filed it years ago thinking of the future in abstract terms, like a fire extinguisher you never expect to use. He stared past me at the trees, calculating wind. Good, he said. Let's make it official. I made 3 calls that night. To the lawyer who handled the trust, to the family accountant who never liked my father's math, to a Boston friend in real estate law, quiet and surgical, who owed me a favor from a lifetime ago. All it took was a precise email and documents that could stand up straight alone. The investigation would begin with a dull click, like a fuse tucked into a wall. We cleaned the garage the next afternoon the way people work when waiting for thunder. In a corner, under a drop cloth, I found a mildewed box of VHS tapes. Most were family birthdays and unfocused vacations. One had a strip of brittle masking tape labeled 2002 July Reunion. Out of boredom or instinct, I slid it into the old player in the den. Grain flickered. My father, younger and looser, stood in front of a campfire telling 2 uncles how easy it was to move money around without leaving a trace. He raised a beer like a thesis defense. I could steal from my own kids if I wanted to, he said, and grinned. They'd never see it coming. I watched the screen until the static felt like weather. Then I digitized the clip, sent a copy to my lawyer, and, anonymously, mailed a USB to my mother. Not as kindness, as clarity. 3 days later, her voicemail arrived in a voice that didn't know itself. She was sobbing in gasps, words falling apart mid-syllable. I don't know what's happening. Everything is falling apart. Please, Alara, stop this. You're destroying the family. I let it play to the end. Then I erased it. Rick drained his coffee and looked at me through the screened porch light. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, very gently, let's make it really hurt. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for a reckoning. But sometimes those are the same road until the turnoff appears. The turn was ahead. I could already feel the curve. The thing about a fuse is you don't have to see it burning to know the fire's coming. By Monday morning, the trust attorney had replied with the clean efficiency of a surgeon. Clause invoked. Notice of investigation drafted. Need your signature to proceed. I printed, signed, and faxed from the general store 20 minutes down the mountain, the kind of place that sells deer corn, postcards, and the ability to ruin a liar's week. When I came back, Uncle Rick had spread documents across the kitchen table like a war map. The 2015 IOU sat in the center, radiating consequence. Around it, Grandpa's trust language highlighted in yellow, a list of assets that had ever touched Grandpa's name. The car lease, the shore vacation rental that mysteriously paid for itself, A small brokerage account no one mentioned at holidays because it complicated the narrative of, we're just getting by. Paper tells on people, Rick said, tapping his knuckle against the IOU. They forget that. I nodded. Evidence makes its own weather. We added exhibits, my text confirming Dad's vote, the Venmo transfer that preceded the safe going empty, the post-reunion timeline. I wrote a short affidavit in the same voice I used for invoices. Precise, bloodless, undeniable. The family accountant called that afternoon. Cautious but curious, like someone approaching a dog that used to bite and suddenly sits. Alara, I've had concerns for a while, he said, lowering his tone, even though no one could overhear him. If this enters audit, they will have to reconcile Grandpa's estate distributions, vehicle financing, and any rental income. Have you considered a forensic team? I have one, I said. They just don't know it yet. At dusk, the generator coughed, the lights hiccuped, and the woods thickened to a single sound. The phone on the wall, the landline, rang. Rick raised an eyebrow and answered. He listened, said nothing, then passed me the receiver. Sweetheart, my mother said, her voice damp with urgency but newly careful. There's been a misunderstanding. Your father was trying to... She caught herself. We were trying to handle things like a family. You took $18,000 out of my safe, I said. There was no misunderstanding. There was access and an opinion. I'm asking you to stop this investigation. The word sounded foreign in her mouth, as if she'd rather say tantrum. No, I said softly, and hung up. That no was a museum piece. Simple, rare, expensive. The notices went out by certified mail the next morning. A demand for an accounting of all trust-adjacent assets, a request for statements related to the vehicle, a disclosure of income associated with the rental home. I didn't need to hear their reaction to know it landed. I felt the pressure change in the cabin, like thunder rolling somewhere you can't see yet. I didn't wait for thunder. I lit a match. Years ago, in a startup phase where optimism outpaced wisdom, I'd formed a small shell LLC as a joke invoice vehicle, Tyler C. Investments. It had a legitimate bank account and, inconveniently for Tyler, his name. Sitting at Rick's old desktop, I cross-referenced deposits I could still access from an archived email trail, odd sums that resembled side money, moving through a college kid's brand. Then I compiled everything into a neat packet for the university's aid office and filed a confidential report with the Department of Education. Not an accusation. A question asked with documentation. Are you underwriting need that doesn't exist? By midweek, the aide froze. Campus housing flagged him. A hole dropped across his schedule like a curtain. Tyler called 6 times and texted apologies that weren't apologies. They were just verbs looking for a discount. I didn't know about the safe. Dad said, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. We were talking. This was adult conversation, on paper, with stakes. Next, Uncle Rick filed to collect. He didn't shout. He notarized. The county clerk stamped a claim for the 8-year-old loan plus interest. The stamp was beautiful, an old-world violence. With the claim in motion, Rick's lawyer set a lien on my parents' newer house, the one they bragged about at Christmas, the one staged last spring for the move south they kept promising themselves. A lien doesn't raise its voice either. It simply says, no one leaves until the bill is paid. I drove by the old neighborhood out of a habit I thought I'd killed. A moving van idled at the curb with no boxes on its back, hope with nowhere to go. My father paced the yard, strangling his cell phone with his fist. My mother sat on the porch steps, elbows on knees, face in hands. The black Mercedes SUV, Tyler's, gleamed like a threat that couldn't quite cash itself. I remembered the day they called it a graduation present, how the plates ended up in his name, how a whisper of college-related asset floated around it like perfume. Back at the cabin, I submitted a tip to the IRS, misuse of student funds, unreported income, co-signed debt attached to grants, with supporting PDFs. Not a spectacle, a memo. While the agencies did what agencies do, slow, implacable work, I did what storytellers do when truth needs a microphone. I sent an anonymous dossier to a New Haven blog that loves small, local corruption the way some people love high school football. The file included the digitized 2002 campfire clip, the lien, the aid freeze, the trust clause and notice. Selected redacted bank exhibits. They ran it the next morning. Connecticut family probed for financial abuse, estate irregularities, and student aid fraud. The photo was just a stock image of a gavel, but the comments weren't stock at all. A regional site picked it up, then Reddit braided it into a thread. Then a former colleague of my father's wrote, "This tracks," and linked to customer complaints already pinging HR. By Friday, Dad was suspended pending investigation. My phone lit up with numbers I didn't recognize, and one I did. Tyler. "Why are you doing this?" he wrote. I typed a dozen answers and sent none. The truth didn't fit in a text bubble. Because you stood there and watched while they emptied my safe and called it a vote. Because you benefited from a story where I was a line item, not a person. That night, Uncle Rick brought me a beer and didn't toast. We sat on the steps and watched the sky bleed out. "You're just getting started," he said. The backlash arrived dressed in legal stationery. My father filed a probate petition claiming Grandpa's trust had been mismanaged and should be reopened for irregularities. It was a desperate hinge. If everything was flawed, then nothing he did was theft. Rick snorted when he read the copy. "Let him open the door," he said. "He doesn't know what's on the other side." We had more doors. While the petition lumbered into bureaucracy, I digitized a second home video. Thanksgiving 2007, our old house. The camera too close to faces. The turkey too dry. Off to the side, my father bragged to an uncle about cash-only consulting and how he could move it through the kids' accounts to avoid detection. He name-checked me like I was a routing number with hair. I packaged the clip, added it to the IRS file, and copied the trust team. Fax, then fire. The financial aid office responded to my earlier packet with the polite brutality of institutions trained to smile while they cut. They had interviewed Tyler and reconciled new information. The letter used small, calm words. Aid revoked. Record flagged. Separation from the university effective immediately. 2 days later, an audit notice landed at my parents' house. I didn't have to break the mail to know it screamed. Tyler drove to the cabin without texting first. He looked like a sleep-deprived idea of himself, thinner, rimmed in gray. We stood under the porch roof while rain crossed the yard on diagonal orders. "Do you hate me?" he asked. "No," I said. "I just stopped caretaking you." His mouth trembled, but he didn't cry. "Mom sleeps in the guest room now. Dad doesn't talk. There was a letter from the IRS this morning." I waited. He reached into his jacket and handed me a sealed envelope. "I found this in Dad's desk. I think you should see it." Inside, a typed letter to Grandpa, dated 2009, where my father confessed to borrowing $2,500, promising repayment in 5 years. He hadn't repaid. The last line tried to seal a family in a single sentence. "If you tell Alex or Rick, it will destroy what's left of this family." Tyler shoved his hands into his pockets like he wanted to disappear into them. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear." "I believe you," I said. It wasn't absolution. It was a receipt. Statement received. After he left, Rick read the letter twice and set it beside the IOU like puzzle pieces that had been waiting for each other. "Your dad's not just a thief," he said. "He's a coward." He looked up, grin quick and feral. "You want to finish this?" "What's left?" He tapped the trust folder. "Collection is payment. Consequence is memory." We didn't sleep much after that. I combed through account summaries and public filings until the numbers began to behave. Buried in a routine report tied to Tyler's name sat a small, neat wire, $19,426, A8, sheltered in a bank I didn't recognize, out of state. The memo called it Education Disbursement Reserve. The routing trails traced back to a branch that once lived inside my father's commute. I called the bank and performed a role I wish I didn't know how to play. "This is Tyler," I said, after passing ID verification I knew by heart from a lifetime in the same house. Birth date, address history, the last 4 digits that had co-signed our lives. They granted a temporary login. There it was, money sitting obediently, my stolen cash laundered into the label of a future I was never invited to plan. We filed an official restitution claim through the trust case. Time would grind. I wasn't interested in patience. I wanted pressure. So I drove back to the Connecticut house and knocked like I hadn't just pulled the thread that emptied their sweater. My mother answered, with the 1,000-yard stare of a person who has been losing for several days in a row. My father came to the door with his arms crossed, like they might hold the roof up. "I know where the money is," I said. "You have 48 hours to wire every penny, or I take the account to civil court, add fraudulent conversion, and staple the campfire video to the cover page. The trust is preparing a full asset forfeiture action. They will look at everything. I don't want apologies. I want my money." He didn't speak. The silence felt less like defiance and more like arithmetic. 2 days later, my bank pinged. Incoming wire, $18,000. No note, no signature, just a number. I didn't celebrate. Fear pays fast. Remorse sends flowers. That night, a notification lit my phone from a high school acquaintance I couldn't pick out of a lineup. A Reddit link. An anonymous, disposable account had posted a manifesto on a parenting forum titled, "Our daughter is ruining our lives. Parents beware." The lies were familiar. I was a freeloader, a failure, a manipulator with shady lawyers, and an estranged uncle pulling strings. He begged for advice on how to stop an adult child from destroying your legacy. I didn't reply. Reddit did. They stitched my dossier to his story like a corrective surgery, linking the article, the lien, the aid revocation, the trust filings. The thread flayed him alive with receipts. By morning, the account had been deleted. I saved everything. I looked around Rick's kitchen. The IOU, the trust clause, the letter to Grandpa, the audit notice, and understood the shift in my bones. I had been living like a walking escrow account for other people's choices. Now I was something else, a woman with documentation and boundaries. "Defense is over," I told Rick. "I want out, not just of the house, of the name." He nodded once, like a judge banging a gavel you can't hear. The next day I filed the paperwork to change my last name. 2 weeks later, the clerk slid a thin envelope across the counter with my new name embossed in black. Whitfield was gone. Alara June Wren was born on paper, but in my chest it felt like an exhale that had been waiting 30 years to happen. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no music swelling in the background, just a line drawn between the past and whatever this was now, peace, or at least the draft of it. Uncle Rick waited outside the courthouse, engine idling. He looked at the envelope, then at me. "How does it feel?" "Like cutting a rope," I said. "Good," he grinned. "Now start walking before somebody tries to tie it back together." That afternoon, I moved into a small apartment in Maple Harbor, a coastal town 3 hours away. 3rd floor, crooked stairs, a heater that rattled like a distant train. I bought a used couch off Craigslist, 3 plates from a thrift shop, and a record player that only worked if you set a coffee mug on the lid to keep it steady. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night, I played an old vinyl, Fleetwood Mac, Landslide. It cracked and skipped halfway through, but I didn't mind. I was finally listening to a life that didn't sound like an argument. I blocked every number with my parents' area code, deleted the family group chat, switched banks, opened an account under my new name. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even Melissa, my one cousin who had quietly taken my side. For the first time in years, no one could reach me. Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, the final transfer notice appeared in my inbox. Case ID 45167R, Trust Restitution. Funds cleared. The restitution had gone through. Not just the $18,000, with penalties, interest, and the trust's protective clause payout. The total was $20,900. I stared at the number. For a long time, I didn't even touch it. Because it wasn't just money. It was proof that my side of the story existed in ink, not whispers. I didn't buy anything big. No new car, no designer furniture. I just sent $500 to the Vermont Humane Shelter in Rick's name and tucked the rest away for a down payment, someday. That evening, Rick called. "Got your wire. You made it official, huh?" "It's done." "Not until you toast it," he said. He held up a glass on FaceTime. Bourbon. Neat. I lifted my chipped mug of tea. "To clean endings," I said. "Nah," he smirked. "To messy beginnings. They're harder to fake." We drank, and for the first time I let the silence hang without expecting it to turn violent. Weeks turned into a rhythm I didn't know how to recognize at first. No sudden calls, no midnight guilt, no Venmo requests disguised as family emergencies. Just work, quiet, and sunlight crawling across the walls. I started freelancing again, marketing for small businesses, remote design work. My first client was a cafe owner who sent me fresh biscotti as payment for the first week. I laughed when I opened the box because it was the kind of gesture my old life would have mocked as small. But small was good. Small was honest. Sometimes at night, I'd scroll through the folder labeled receipts, not out of obsession, out of gratitude, because those files were the reason I could finally sleep. Then one evening, as rain tapped on the window, a name I didn't expect flashed across a new message request. Tyler. For a second, my thumb hovered over decline. Then curiosity won. Tyler. I heard you changed your name. Me. I did. Tyler. I guess that means I can't find you anymore. Me. You just did. He didn't type for a full minute. The 3 dots came and went like a ghost trying to decide if it should speak. Tyler. Mom started working part-time. Dad's still not talking to anyone. He sold the Mercedes. IRS took the rental. The house might go next. Me. I'm sorry it turned out that way. Tyler. You're not sorry. Me. No. But I don't enjoy it either. Another pause. Then, Tyler. I found a job. Construction. It's not much, but it's mine. That line hit harder than any accusation, because it sounded like the first honest sentence I'd ever heard from him. Me. Good. Build something that's yours. That's all that matters. He replied with a single emoji, a hammer, and then he was gone. A month later, an unfamiliar number left a voicemail. I recognized the tremor before the words. Elara, or whatever name you're using now, my mother's voice said, soft, exhausted. We're moving soon. I just wanted to tell you I kept the mug, the one that said world's best daughter. I glued it back together. The crack shows, but it still holds water. I didn't call back. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit in my voicemail box like a keepsake of something that used to mean love. Spring came early in Maple Harbor. One morning I stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, the sea somewhere beyond the rooftops. The town smelled like salt and paint. Someone downstairs was playing piano through an open window, off-key, but sincere. I thought about everything that had happened, the safe, the vote, the lies, the paperwork, the name change, and how all of it led here. I didn't get revenge. I got distance. I didn't win. I just stopped losing. And that, I realized, was enough. That night, I took out my notebook and wrote one last line under the folder labeled receipts. You taught me how to fight and then forgot that I could. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights. The record player clicked as the vinyl reached its end, static fading into quiet. And for once, the quiet didn't feel like something missing. It felt like home.